This happened last summer when my parents left town for a weekend wedding. I stayed home because I had a part-time job the next morning. Being home alone usually didn't bother me, but that night there was a huge storm rolling through the area. By around 10 p.m., the rain was coming down hard. The wind kept rattling the windows, and every few minutes thunder shook the entire house. I was downstairs in the living room watching YouTube, trying to ignore the storm outside. Then, the power went out. Everything went completely dark. The only light in the room came from the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. The Wi-Fi was gone too, so my video stopped playing. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. At first it felt kind of exciting, like a mini adventure being home alone during a storm. I went to the kitchen to grab a candle from the drawer. That's when I heard something outside. At first it sounded like someone running through the rain. I walked toward the front window and tried to look outside, but the glass was covered in water and the porch light was out because of the power outage. Another flash of lightning lit up the yard for a split second, and I swear I saw a figure standing near the end of the driveway. I blinked and looked again, but it was dark again. I told myself it was probably just a tree branch moving in the wind. Then there was a knock on the door. 3 slow knocks. My stomach immediately dropped. Nobody should have been out in that storm. I stayed completely still, listening. For a moment there was only the sound of rain pounding against the roof. Then the knocking happened again. This time louder. "Hello?" A man's voice called from outside. His voice sounded calm, but something about it felt wrong. "I think my car broke down," he said. "Can you help me?" I didn't answer. My parents had always warned me never to open the door for strangers, especially when I was home alone. Another flash of lightning lit up the front yard again. This time I clearly saw the man standing on the porch. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie that was completely soaked from the rain. But what scared me most was the way he was standing. He wasn't facing the door, he was facing the window, looking directly at me, even though the house was dark. My heart started racing. There was no way he should have been able to see me inside. Then slowly, he walked up to the door again. The doorknob started shaking. He tried it once, then again. Locked. For a few seconds, everything went quiet. I slowly backed away from the door and pulled my phone out to call 911. That's when I heard footsteps running along the side of the house. My chest tightened. He wasn't leaving. He was looking for another way inside. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of someone trying to open the back door. The handle rattled violently. Then a loud bang. He was trying to force it open. I ran upstairs and locked myself in my bedroom while talking to the police operator. The banging continued for another minute before suddenly stopping. The operator told me officers were already on their way. About 5 minutes later, red and blue lights flashed through my window. The police searched the area, but the man was gone. They never found him. But the part that still bothers me is this. The next morning when my parents came home, we checked the front porch camera. The footage showed the man walking up to the door during the storm. But before knocking, he leaned down and looked directly into the camera and smiled like he knew I was watching. My name is Roy, and this happened about a year ago when I was 25. I was working late at my office in the city, finishing some reports before the weekend. By the time I left the building, it was already around 8 p.m. The moment I stepped outside, I realized the weather had gotten bad. Rain was pouring down non-stop and the wind was strong enough to push water across the streets. Cars were moving slowly because the road was starting to flood. I didn't own a car back then, so I normally took the bus home. The bus stop was about a 5-minute walk from the office. By the time I reached it, my shoes were already soaked from stepping in puddles. The streetlights reflected off the water covering the road, and every few seconds lightning flashed across the sky. The bus stop was empty. At least that's what I thought at first. Then I noticed someone sitting at the far end of the bench. A man. He was hunched forward, wearing a dark coat with the hood pulled over his head. Rain was dripping off the edge of the shelter roof, and the sound of water hitting the pavement filled the quiet street. I nodded slightly as I sat down on the other side of the bench. The man didn't respond. He just sat there, completely still. Something about him felt off. I couldn't see his face clearly because the hood was pulled low. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. Thunder echoed across the sky, and the rain kept getting heavier. Then suddenly the man spoke. "Long night at work?" His voice was low and rough. "Yeah," I said. "Just heading home." The man slowly turned his head toward me. For a brief second, lightning flashed, and I saw his face. His skin looked extremely pale, almost gray under the streetlight. His eyes looked tired, but wide open in a strange way, like he hadn't blinked in a long time. I quickly looked away, trying not to stare. "You live around here?" he asked. "Not too far," I said. Another long silence followed. Then the man quietly chuckled. "I've been waiting here for a while," he said. Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. "How long?" I asked without thinking. The man tilted his head slightly. "Since before the rain started." That didn't make sense. The storm had begun almost an hour earlier. I looked down the road hoping to see the bus headlights. Nothing. Just empty, wet streets. Then the man stood up. Slowly. He was tall, taller than I expected. Maybe around 6'4". As he stepped closer to the edge of the shelter, the streetlight illuminated his face again. That's when I noticed something disturbing. His clothes were completely dry. Not a single drop of water on his coat. Even though he had supposedly been there before the storm started. He turned and looked directly at me. "You know," he said calmly, "buses stop running during storms like this." My chest tightened. I checked earlier. I pulled out my phone quickly. No signal. The man smiled slightly. "You'll be waiting here a long time," he said. Then he took a step toward me. My instincts kicked in immediately. I stood up and stepped back. "Actually," I said quickly, "my friend just texted me. He's picking me up." The man's smile slowly faded. For a few seconds, he just stared at me. Then he leaned slightly closer. Too close. "You shouldn't lie," he said quietly. At that moment, headlights appeared down the street, a car turning the corner. The man immediately stepped back into the darkness outside the bus stop. The car drove past us without stopping, but when I looked back toward the sidewalk, the man was gone. Completely gone. No footsteps. No sound. Just empty rain-soaked pavement. I didn't wait for the bus after that. I walked nearly a mile in the storm to reach a gas station and called a taxi. But the strangest part happened the next day. When I checked the city transit website, the last bus on that route had stopped running at 7:15 p.m., almost an hour before I even arrived at the bus stop. Which means the man was right. And somehow, he knew I would be there. My name is Daniel, and this happened when I was a university student. Me and 4 of my friends had rented a small house in a city near our university. It wasn't anything special, just a cheap place students could afford. The house had 2 floors, creaky wooden stairs, and an old kitchen that looked like it hadn't been renovated in 20 years. Usually the house was noisy because all 5 of us lived there. But that weekend, 3 of my friends had gone out of town for a short vacation. The 4th one went to stay with his girlfriend. So that night, I was completely alone in the house. It was already raining when evening came. By around 9 p.m., the storm had gotten worse. Heavy rain slammed against the windows, and strong wind made the trees outside scrape against the walls of the house. I was in my room trying to study, but the storm was making it hard to focus. Around 10 p.m., I got hungry. There wasn't much food in the kitchen except some old bread, so I decided to order a pizza. The delivery time said about 30 minutes. While waiting, I went downstairs and sat in the living room watching something on my laptop. The storm outside kept getting louder. Thunder shook the house every few minutes. About 20 minutes later, I heard something strange. A knock. But it wasn't at the front door. It sounded like it came from the back door in the kitchen. That immediately felt weird. The delivery driver should have come to the front door. I walked into the kitchen slowly. Rain was pouring outside the glass window near the back door, and lightning flashed across the yard. Then I heard the knock again. 3 slow taps. My heart started beating faster. I walked closer and called out through the door. "Hello?" No response. Just the sound of rain. I hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the door and opened it slightly. There was no one there. The backyard was completely empty. Water was flooding the grass, and the wind pushed rain sideways across the yard. I closed the door and locked it again. At that point, I figured maybe I imagined the knocking. Then a few minutes later, the front doorbell rang. That had to be the pizza. I grabbed my wallet and walked to the front door. When I opened it, a delivery guy stood there holding a pizza box. He looked soaked from the rain. "Rough night," he said. "Yeah," I replied, taking the pizza. But before leaving, the delivery guy hesitated. Then he looked at me and asked something strange. "Hey, was someone else just here?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the side of the house. "When I pulled up, I thought I saw someone standing near your backyard gate." My stomach dropped. "No," I said slowly. "I'm the only one here." The delivery guy looked uneasy. "Well, maybe it was just the rain," he said before walking back to his car. I locked the front door and went back into the living room. But now I couldn't stop thinking about what he said. Someone near the backyard. Exactly where I had heard the knocking earlier. Trying to calm myself down, I opened the pizza box and started eating. That's when I heard it again. From upstairs. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps. My entire body froze. There was no one else supposed to be in the house. The footsteps moved across the hallway above me. Then suddenly they stopped. Right above the living room. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed the police. While I whispered to the operator, I kept staring at the staircase. Waiting. Then I heard something that made my stomach turn. The sound of someone slowly walking down the stairs, one step at a time. The wooden steps creaked loudly. I ran out the front door and waited outside in the rain until the police arrived. They searched the entire house, but they didn't find anyone. However, when they checked the back door, the officer noticed something. The lock had been tampered with, like someone had tried to open it from the outside. But the part that still scares me is this: the muddy footprints on the upstairs hallway floor. They didn't belong to me. And none of my roommates were even in the city that night.
If you thought that story was disturbing, wait until you hear what happened in this next one. Click the video on your screen now, and make sure you subscribe, because the next story might be even worse.